Let's take an idea and flesh it out into a full adventure. I'm going to discuss the process I use to create an adventure. Welcome to my channel. I focus on tabletop role-playing games, video games, and science fiction. The idea I'm going to use comes from Loreena McKennitt's The Bonny Swans. And now if you have never heard her, there'll be a link down in the description below about for the link to the song. It's a very haunting song. It's an interesting song, and we'll talk about its origins. I'm going to read the parts of the song that I'm going to use. The lyrics are interesting. I'm going to cut out the chorus. So it says, a farmer there lived in the North Country. He had daughters 1, 2, 3. These daughters, they walked by the river's brim. The eldest pushed the youngest in. O sister, pray lend me a hand, and I will give you house and land. I'll give you neither hand nor glove unless you give me your own true love. Sometimes she sank and sometimes she swam until she came to a miller's dam. The miller's daughter, dressed in red, she went for some water to make some bread. Oh, daddy, daddy, there swims a swan. It's very like a gentlewoman. They placed her on the bank to dry. There came a harper passing by. He made a harp pins of her fingers fair. He made harp strings of her golden hair. He made a harp of her breastbone, and straight it began to play alone. He brought it to her father's hall, and there was the court assembled all. He laid the harp upon the stone, and straight it began to play alone. And there does sit my father the king, and yonder sits my mother the queen. And there doth sit my brother Hugh, and by him William sweet and true. And there does sit my false sister Anne, who dran me for the sake of a man. So we've got an interesting story here. It's a bit of murder, a bit of mystery, a bit of magic. It has some problems. And first off, let's talk about the problems that you're going to have to address if you want to do something like this. You have a story. It's an interesting story, but there are some inconsistencies in the song, and I'll talk about this. Is based upon, I'll put a link to the Frey sisters or that on Wikipedia, which is where some of this came from. The first stanza, whereas the father lived in the a farmer lived in the North Country, and in the last stanza, he's called the king. So you have this interesting dichotomy that you have to address. Is he a farmer or is he the king? It's more interesting if he's the king, because this is the reason why the adventurers would want to get involved. You've got a missing princess, and the king is going to offer a reward for her return. And then the second line, he had daughters 1, 2, 3. But you're talking about the eldest and the youngest. What about the middle daughter? Well, the easiest solution is just to omit the middle daughter, because you can go with the story with just 2 daughters, because she's never mentioned anywhere else in the story. Now you run into the next question that you have is, why does the youngest have house and land to offer to the oldest, and the oldest isn't interested? So either the oldest has house and land, or maybe she's lost it, but she wants the house and land from William, which was the love of the younger daughter. So the older daughter is jealous of the younger daughter. She wants her sister's beloved. In theory, we could say it's either her fiance, or actually it could be her husband, whatever. She wants what her younger sister has. So in some way, we have to assume one way to fill this question is we can say that the elder sister has lost her lands. Now we can come up with a story for that. Somehow, either she married poorly or whatever, but that's one way that she is actually a widow, that she'd married someone, and when he died, somehow he died in disgrace and she lost her lands. So she wants her younger sister's husband who is titled and has lands. So now we've got that. Now we've got the interesting question about here she gets pushed in, she can't swim. And if you understand, maybe it's wool, they're wearing woolen clothing, which means it soaks up the water. It gets very difficult to get out of the water. And so she comes down to the miller's dam. This is where they would dam off the water so that the water would go through the water wheel to turn the mill. And the miller's daughter, dressed in red, which is an interesting piece, that she went for some water to make some bread, and she finds a swan. So somehow the woman, the youngest daughter, gets pushed into the river, the river's brim. She gets pushed in, she sinks, and she turns into a swan. We can do a polymorph self, polymorph other, some sort of magic that converted her into a magical swan, and the swan is almost dead, and the miller's daughter pulls it out of the water, puts it on the riverbank, hopefully to survive, but it doesn't. It dies on the bank. But along comes a harper, person who deals with harps, and he takes from her fingers fair, what's left of the fingers of the swan, that they're called, I think they're called finger feathers or whatever. They're the swans of that. He makes harp pins from the fingers fair, and that's the thing to pluck the harp, I believe. And then he makes strings from her golden hair, so we get this weird magical weaving of this, and he makes a harp of her breastbone, and straight it begins to play alone. So the harp is a magical harp that I'll actually play. So the harper then brings this to the king to present it, and the harp is there, and the harp in theory, the harp now in the presence of the king sings the tale. He says, "There does sit my father the king, and yonder sits my mother the queen, and there does sit my brother Hugh, and by him William sweet and true, and there does sit my false sister Anne, who drowned me for the sake of a man." Now, how do we flesh this out into adventure? Well, we can start with very simple. There's an offer of reward to find the princess who is missing. Now we can have this done shortly after she turns up missing, and the party comes in. You've got a bunch of people to interview. You've got the king, you've got the queen, you've got which is the brother. So you've got three daughters. If we get rid of one of them, we can actually put that in there. It adds, but it's not from the story, so it allows you to flesh out another daughter. You can, and then you've got William, who is the love of the youngest and now being consoled in his grief by the oldest. So she's trying to get this. So this you can flesh out if you flesh out each of these NPCs, and I did some little bit of fleshing out of each of those. You can use the NPC character that I've done, so you flesh them out. The next step is if you're going to draw, you could draw up, or you could do this purely in the theater of the mind. If this is a castle, you could assume that each of the main characters have their own area, their own room in the castle, and you can come in and talk to each one of them. So at first you don't know where or what happened. So you're going to have to investigate. All you know is the youngest is missing. From the discussion, you can decide who tells them, if there's any conflict between the sisters or what happened to the sisters. They're going to get conflicting stories. We know that the eldest daughter, Anne, is a murderer, so she's probably a liar, so she's not going to tell the truth about it, and it's going to be hidden. And then if you go down to the riverbank, you've got the riverbank to investigate, to search through, to find the slippage, where it looks like somebody slipped into the river, and then follow that down and then investigate. You've got the miller's daughter. And then that can lead you to the harpist or the harper who makes the harp. And that would lead you to find the harp, which then you bring back to the king, which gives you everything that you want. He gives you the reward because you found out what happened to his daughter. So this is the outline of the story. So you've got all the main characters. You need to flesh them out. You could do this. I would probably just do this, wing it, because you can fill out each one of these as time goes by, as you want to, or you can flesh them out fully, right? Describe it up, draw up the castle, draw up the riverbank, draw up the miller's house and the dam, where the miller, what's called the miller's dam, where the water backs up so that it can run the water wheel, which turns the turns the mill to do that. And you have the miller's daughter, and then you have the other non-player, another NPC, which is the harper who makes this. And you have this interesting tale of magic and mystery and murder. So I think this would be a fun adventure to play, because it's based upon some interesting stories, and it has some inconsistencies which you have to iron out, because your players are going to get intrigued by that. They'll point out the inconsistencies. So those are the things that you need to prepare for. If you pick up a story like this, and there are lots of them, you're going to hear songs, you're going to hear various legends and myths. You pick them up, you adapt them to your world, or to the scenarios that are the type of scenario that you want to run. You adjust it, rename some characters perhaps if it's too obvious of a well-known story, so that the players don't recognize it immediately, and work through the layout, and you can see how the players can try and solve the murder mystery. And mysteries are always interesting to add to an adventure, because they're mystery. Mystery novels are very popular. Though we're not specifically talking about in fantasy role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons and all the others, you're trying to find the various. You normally have the different magic that fits well with it. This fits in a fantasy setting because of the magic, but the mystery fits in there quite well and makes it interesting. And because you could end up, each of the members of the party has to go out and talk to the different people in the party. Now this is one where never split the party doesn't apply, because you're in a castle. And unless you want to put it into a haunted castle, which could make it even more interesting. But if it's just in a normal castle with all the courtiers and all the servants and things like that, you could be talking to the servants. They could be helping you find where each of these are. You could look at the interests. If you roll up the interests of each of the characters, what are they interested in? What are their motivations? How do they fit out? So you can play each one of them. But this is the process you need to think about. Think about the questions that the players are going to ask. And if there are inconsistencies in the story, like this has some inconsistencies, like where was the second sister? Was she involved? Did she see? Was she not there? Why wasn't she there? they're going to ask those kind of questions. If it's described as a farmer at the beginning, why is he king at the end? So on. You have to be prepared for those type of questions if you're going to introduce this type of story. But you don't need to have all the details worked out. It's good if you do, and you can prepare for this one by fleshing out each of the characters and each of the areas. But I've outlined the areas, the players. You have ideas for their motivation. The king wants his daughter back. The queen wants her daughter back. The brother, wants his sister back. Maybe they're not even, but maybe they're not, there sits my brother, the description in the poem is not anything wrong with her brother. So there's they may not be the closest, but whatever. And there by him, William, sweet and true. So she still loves, even in her harp form, she still loves William, and he's said to be sweet and true. So, but her false sister Anne is the nefarious one. She's the villain in this story, and you have to have the proof to present to the king why Anne is the murderer. And one approach is if you get the harp. So, tell me what you think about this. Have you taken a song? Have you taken a story and done things? I remember a friend of mine once described, he says he took the song Hotel California, stabbed it with his Steely's knives, but they couldn't kill the beast. And it said, had to find the passage back to the place they'd been before. Those are interesting things. You can check out any time you like, but you can never leave. That's another fun story all by itself that can make an adventure. You can flesh out the entire thing with that one. So you can take a song, take the lyrics to the song. I always like to be able to look up the lyrics, read through the lyrics, because sometimes you may not exactly know what the lyrics say. I have a hard time understanding some singers. And you can use them for an adventure. I've done some other ones. I'll talk about some of those some other time, but where you take some music lyrics, you can take some myths, you can take legends, you can adapt them. Have you done this? Would you like to be in an adventure that was like this? Would you like a murder mystery adventure where you're not out particularly killing monsters, but you're trying to solve some mystery, which is a mystery and murder? You may not be able to kill the murderer. You may just try and bring the murderer to justice, which is an interesting challenge all in itself. So give me some comments below. Thank you for watching my video. I look forward to learning what you think about this video. Let me know in the comments below. If you like the video, press the thumbs up button. You can subscribe by clicking the link in the lower left. If you are interested, there are links to more content.